than the present. This is why newly formed political party Change Starts Now has hit the ground running. It's working to reshape the political landscape and ensure a better and brighter future for all. Party President Jardine joins me in studio to tell us more about the party and its journey towards elections. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. So the list is going to be very long when people go and vote. Yeah. Another party has been added. You've decided to start this. Maybe just tell us why.
Great, thank you for having me. Look, I think South Africa is at a fork in the road, okay? And what we're saying is we need to choose what we're calling the change lane. Change is on everyone's lips. South Africans are crying out for change. And I think nothing brings this home more starkly than the president on Thursday night telling us load shedding, it's in hand, the end is near, and here we are where we are today. So Change Starts Now is a message to South Africans that we need to take this election very seriously. It's a game changer for South Africa. If we do not reflect on the consequences of how we vote, the 2029 election will have a very different conversation. So Change Starts Now is really about saying to citizens of this country, because you see the problem is for many political parties, we all are reduced to voters in a window during the electoral season, and then after that they forget about us. So we want to empower citizens to vote, and then in that way to effect change through the kind of government that we put together.
How are you going to be different though, and how do you stand out as a political party? Because there are so many political parties at the moment, there are so many promises. Yeah. And the reality is that it confuses the voter because you don't know what to expect. A lot of people have expressed, I'd rather stay with the devil I know and the political party I know. Even though there are major challenges, but what is so different about this political party that you can say to the voter, this is what we are going to be doing?
Well, the first thing is that we all need to understand there are consequences to carrying on the way we are. And for me personally, when the facts changed about the path that we're on, I changed my mind about my electoral decisions over the years. And I think we're all at that point. Where we will differentiate ourselves is that we are coming with solutions, with a fix. So when we say South Africa needs jobs, and you may or may not have seen that Change Starts Now commissioned research that included 9,000 South Africans telling us what was on their minds. And the number one issue is jobs. Now, everyone talks about jobs, employment. We feel that we know how to exercise and use those levers to create jobs. And I'll give you an example. In the National Development Plan published over 10 years ago, it was very clear, and this was a plan put out by the government with Cyril Ramaphosa as the chairman and the head of the National Development Plan. It stated very clearly that if we spend 30% of GDP on infrastructure, we should be able to reduce our unemployment to about 10%. Nothing has really happened. We're sitting at 14%. Kenya is sitting at 20%. It's not rocket science. And for me personally, to step up and say we need to do something is to feel that we have all of these solutions. We don't really need new policies. We know what needs to be done. It just needs leadership that wants to get things done and knows how to get things done. If you take load shedding, for example, we know, despite being told all the time that load shedding is going to end, we know it's going to take another 3 or 4 years unless we do some key things along the way. Now, on Thursday night, the president announced a plan to build a transmission grid. That's not a new idea. It's been around for a long time. Things just don't get done because it's stuck in the gridlock in the government. And we need new people in the room with new energy and new ideas to get things done. And Change Starts Now is focused squarely on how do we get things done.
I want to speak about how you would tackle service delivery issues because, having covered, especially last year, some of the service delivery challenges that we experienced, I mean, the fact that people were still dying of cholera in 2023, you just can't believe that people either just don't have access to water, and when they do have access to water, they're dying. And these issues are really also at the center of areas that are neglected and forgotten, how are you also going to include bringing change to those communities and those people and their lives?
So I'm glad you picked the example of cholera, right? Last year we all focused on Hammanskraal. There were 5 other locations, perhaps more, where there was cholera, right? The Romans solved cholera 2,000 years ago. We shouldn't be dealing with cholera in 2024. The way we would go about it, we know that through the way procurement has been applied, people are getting huge tenders and not delivering on the water infrastructure. This government currently has a procurement bill that will essentially institutionalize the way these tenders have been awarded. And at the root of this evil is getting the right people who understand technically what has to be done so that water and other basic services can be delivered. We will change all of that to make sure that the people who are paid taxpayer money, a lot of taxpayer money, actually know what they're doing and can deliver those basic services. So we say withdraw that bill. Let's go back to the drawing board. It's not working. It's not delivering services for our people.
Something else that comes up quite a lot, and I'm keen to hear how you as a new political party will incorporate this, is that a lot of communities feel sidelined and not listened to, completely ignored and neglected. And that's distressing, because if anybody knows the challenges, it's those that live in these communities, whether it's crime, whether it's just lack of service delivery, serious GBV cases. Are you going to try and listen to the people on the ground and also try and get them involved in providing solutions to their issues?
So I think one of the big problems we have is that we have a government that doesn't see the people of this country. They are invisible. And part of that solution is making sure, and that's why earlier I mentioned, we see this as citizen involvement, because you don't only want to see a person as a voter in a certain window. And so let's take crime, for example. Around the world, it's accepted that the best way to manage crime is to make the management of crime prevention more local. And so communities have to be involved. And so talking to people, hearing what they're saying, and seeing them is a very big part of this. I was at a school in Sharpeville on the first day of school. That school hasn't had electricity for 3 years. It's shocking that that school has not had electricity for 3 years. No one sees them, nobody feels their pain. It's just acceptable for that sort of situation to carry on. And I think we solve this problem of people being made to feel invisible when we have a government that is not preoccupied with its own shenanigans and that is preoccupied with serving the people of this country.
What about how far we've come 30 years into democracy? This is a critical year. It's also a critical year for current political parties. But what, having listened to the State of the Nation address and the President speaking about Dinswalo and how much has been done. And, I heard my colleague Sipamandla Goge asking, Mr. President, are you going to show us who Dinswalo is? And he says there are many Dinswalos. And there was so much negativity around that, to say that you are so out of touch with what's actually happening on the ground, that Dinswalo doesn't exist. But what are your views on 30 years into democracy? And I'm sure that's probably why you're starting this political party, because perhaps you don't feel that enough has been done 30 years later.
Well, I thought it was quite disingenuous of the President to compare this term of government to 1994. That's 30 years ago. What I would have expected was for the President to say, when I started my presidency, I undertook to do these things. It's 5 years later, this term is ending, there's an election that's looming, this is what I've achieved. So to go back 30 years, quite frankly, is disingenuous. In 1994, the very act of being able to vote for the first time restored the dignity of millions of South Africans. In the last 10 years or so in particular, we've seen that dignity being stripped away. Whether it's the granny waiting in the sun, or the student who doesn't get their NSFAS grant, or a public hospital where 90% of people go for their healthcare. It's the first and ultimate resort of healthcare. And people go there and have shocking experiences. So I think as we look back on the last 30 years, yes, 1994 was a seminal moment, but this democracy needs to be giving more to the people of this country. We cannot trade on that historic moment. As decision makers and as government, we actually need to now say, it's 2024, we live in a very complex world, we have a complex economy. How do we manage all of these things? And I think, you know, Tsinswalo and other young people, the truth of the matter is that 1 in 2 young people in this country is unemployed. And so the challenge is phenomenal. We have so many young people who are completely out of the system, whether they did or did not go to university. There are many graduates who are unemployed. Unemployment in general is a problem. In our baseline research that we did with 9,000 South Africans, crime and security is a huge issue. So through our research and talking to people, this morning I was in Jabulani meeting with school kids, talking about how they're feeling, about where they find themselves. We need to listen, we need to make people feel seen, and we need to act on that.
Absolutely. Just lastly, I'm curious to know whether it's a really hotly contested year. There are so many political parties. Do you think that you have support? How do you see things going for you?
So yes, it is a hotly contested year. We're going to test that. South Africans have choices. It's the very essence of democracy. You know, when I decided to step away from the private sector and get involved in these debates, it was really about how do we change the landscape so that South Africans are not stuck with the same old choices, because the world has moved on. Politics is becoming more modernized. We're trying to follow that model. And in this very competitive landscape, we will need to make sure that our message lands with citizens so that they can decide, enough of this, let's give some fresh faces and fresh voices with fresh ideas and energy a chance. And I think that's the challenge.
Have you been told when elections are going to be? Because we all want to know.
Now I'm also waiting for the big announcement.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming through. We really do appreciate it. That was Change Starts Now leader, Jardine, just speaking to us about new political